I'm on my knees, the cold concrete biting into my skin, but the physical discomfort is a distant thought. My breath hitches, a ragged sound in the vast, echoing space of this abandoned warehouse. The air is thick with dust and decay, a metallic tang that churns my stomach. A single bare bulb casts long, dancing shadows, doing little to dispel the oppressive gloom. My eyes are fixed on the polished shoes before me, then slowly travel up the expensive fabric of his suit to the face that holds my fate. His expression is unreadable, a mask of calm authority that chills me more than the biting wind seeping through the broken windows. My heart pounds a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat of terror. I've come here to beg, to plead for a mercy I have no right to ask for. The words are stuck in my throat. He leans forward, his voice a low rumble that cuts through the silence. Who told you to bow? My life, until a few weeks ago, was a meticulously organized symphony of sterile environments and small, trusting hands. I am Dr. Evelyn Reed, a pediatrician, and my days unfolded in the comforting rhythm of clinic hours, diagnosing sniffles, administering vaccines, and offering reassurance to anxious parents. The fluorescent lights of my office, the gentle hum of medical equipment, the vibrant drawings taped to the walls, these were the anchors of my existence, a world built on healing and hope. I found solace in the predictable chaos of children, in the quiet satisfaction of easing their pain, in the simple, profound trust they placed in me. My apartment, a modest but cozy space filled with books and the scent of freshly brewed coffee, offered a sanctuary from the demands of the day. It was a life of purpose, of quiet dignity, far removed from the shadows and whispers that now consume my every waking thought. The greatest challenge I faced was usually a particularly stubborn fever, or a parent's unfounded fear, never the chilling prospect of facing down a man whose power extended far beyond any medical chart or legal statute. This routine, this carefully constructed normalcy, felt like an impenetrable fortress, a shield against the darker currents of the world, a shield I now realize was made of glass, shattered by a single, desperate plea. The contrast between that life and this moment, kneeling on cold, unforgiving concrete in a desolate warehouse, is a chasm I can barely comprehend. The air here is heavy, not with the antiseptic scent of a hospital, but with the metallic tang of rust and the stale odor of forgotten industry, a grim testament to the decay that permeates this place. My tailored clinic clothes, usually a symbol of my professionalism, now feel like a costume, ill-fitting and utterly out of place in this tableau of silent menace. Every shadow seems to hold a hidden threat, every creak of the aging structure a warning. The quiet hum of my medical devices has been replaced by the unnerving silence, broken only by the frantic pounding of my own heart against my ribs, a desperate drumbeat of terror that threatens to betray the fragile composure I'm desperately trying to maintain. This isn't just a different world. It's an inversion of everything I know, a dark mirror reflecting a reality I never believed I would inhabit, a reality where healing is irrelevant and power is the only currency. The sheer weight of this transition presses down on me, a suffocating blanket of dread. The reason for this terrifying shift, the catalyst that dragged me from my sanctuary into this abyss, is my younger brother, Leo. He was always a dreamer, too bright and too trusting for his own good, with a restless spirit that chafed under the constraints of ordinary life. I'd tried to guide him, to offer him stability, but his path diverged sharply from mine, leading him down avenues I barely understood, filled with promises of quick success and easy money that always seemed to unravel into deeper trouble. He had a charm that could disarm anyone, a quick wit, but beneath it lay a vulnerability that made him susceptible to the wrong influences. I saw the signs, the late nights, the evasive answers, the subtle changes in his demeanor, but I always believed I could pull him back, that my love and logic would be enough to steer him clear of true danger. Now, looking back, I realize my optimism was a luxury I couldn't afford, a blindness that allowed the shadows to creep closer, unnoticed, until they finally swallowed him whole, dragging me along in their wake. The first rupture in my carefully constructed peace came as a series of increasingly frantic phone calls. each one laced with a growing desperation that tightened a knot in my stomach. Leo's voice, usually so vibrant and full of life, became strained, hushed, filled with an undercurrent of fear he couldn't quite conceal. He spoke in vague terms, hinting at bad debts and people who don't forgive, words that felt alien and terrifying in the context of our lives. He wouldn't elaborate, only pleaded for money, for help, for a way out, each plea more urgent than the last. I sent what I could, emptying my savings, convinced that a financial solution would make the problem disappear, that I could buy him back from whatever dark corner he'd stumbled into. But the demands never stopped. They only grew, escalating in their intensity and the sheer impossibility of their sums. Each call left me trembling, a cold dread seeping into my bones, a premonition of the inevitable storm gathering on the horizon, threatening to engulf us both. I tried everything within my power to help him, to pull him back from the precipice he seemed determined to fall from. I offered to pay off his debts, to find him a new job, to even move him to a different city, away from whatever insidious forces had ensnared him. I spent sleepless nights researching legal aid, trying to understand the labyrinthine world of debt collection, only to realize that Leo's problem wasn't with a bank or a legitimate lender. The threats became more explicit, delivered not just through Leo, but through veiled messages left on my own voicemail, chillingly calm voices promising consequences if the matter wasn't resolved. My medical expertise, my logical mind, my entire professional framework felt utterly useless against this amorphous, terrifying enemy. I was a doctor, trained to heal, to save lives, but I was powerless against a sickness that infected the very fabric of society, a disease of power and control that threatened to consume my brother, and now, by extension, me. The helplessness was a bitter, suffocating taste in my mouth. The incident that finally shattered my world, pushing me beyond the brink of what I thought I could endure, was the disappearance of Leo's girlfriend, Sarah. She was a sweet, unassuming young woman, completely innocent in all of this, and her sudden, unexplained absence was a brutal, undeniable message. The police were useless, citing a lack of evidence, a common occurrence in cases where people simply vanish into thin air, especially when the circumstances hinted at something far more sinister than a simple runaway. Her empty apartment, the uneaten meal on the table, the single dropped earring on the floor, these were the silent screams that echoed in my mind, a stark, terrifying confirmation that Leo's troubles had escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. It wasn't just money anymore. It was lives, real lives, being carelessly discarded. The fear for Leo, already a constant companion, intensified into a paralyzing terror, a cold, hard knot in my stomach that refused to loosen. I knew then, with a chilling certainty, that I had to act, no matter the cost, no matter how dangerous the path. That brutal realization, the stark, undeniable truth of Sarah's disappearance, solidified an unbearable certainty within me. I had to go to them. The them was an unspoken entity, a whispered warning in Leo's frantic calls, a shadowy organization that operated beyond the reach of law and order, a power so absolute it could make people vanish without a trace. It was a desperate, terrifying leap into the unknown, a complete abandonment of every principle I held dear, every ethical boundary I had meticulously maintained throughout my life. My rational mind screamed against it, recoiling from the sheer audacity of approaching such a force, but my heart, raw with fear for Leo, overruled all logic. There was no other option, no other avenue left to explore. The police had failed, my own efforts were futile, and time was a rapidly dwindling commodity. I had to confront the source of the darkness, to face the very thing I had always tried to protect myself and my brother from, even if it meant sacrificing a part of myself in the process. The internal conflict raged within me, a brutal war between self-preservation and an overwhelming, desperate love for my brother. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn back, to run, to hide, to pretend this terrifying world didn't exist. The stories I'd heard, the whispers of their reach, the cold, calculating efficiency with which they operated, it all painted a picture of a force utterly devoid of mercy or compassion. I was a doctor, a healer, utterly unprepared for a world where violence was a tool and human life a negotiable commodity. My hands, accustomed to the delicate precision of surgery, now trembled with a fear I couldn't control. Yet the image of Leo's haunted eyes, the memory of Sarah's bright smile, fueled a stubborn, desperate resolve. I had to try. I had to face this monster, even if it meant walking into a trap, even if it meant sacrificing my own safety, my own future, for the slim chance of bringing him back. The weight of that decision pressed down on me, a crushing burden. Making contact was a clandestine dance of whispers and coded messages, a descent into a shadowy underworld I never knew existed. It started with a burner phone, given to me by a terrified acquaintance of Leo's, a man whose eyes darted nervously, clearly desperate to be rid of the burden. The instructions were sparse, delivered in clipped, emotionless tones over crackling lines, each word a chilling command. Be at the old industrial park, Warehouse 7, midnight. Alone. No phones, no tricks. The anonymity of the voice, the stark simplicity of the directives, only amplified the sense of dread. There was no room for negotiation, no space for questions. It was an order, a summons to a place where my normal rules of engagement, my professional decorum, my very identity as Dr. Evelyn Reed, would be utterly meaningless. I was stepping into a void, stripped of all my defenses, armed only with a desperate plea and a trembling hope. The journey to the warehouse was a blur of heightened senses and suffocating anxiety. My car, usually a familiar extension of my daily routine, felt like a fragile shell, hurtling me towards an unknown fate. The city lights gradually receded in my rearview mirror, replaced by the desolate, unlit stretches of industrial roads, each turn taking me deeper into a landscape of forgotten factories and abandoned dreams. The silence in the car was deafening, broken only by the frantic thumping of my heart and the shallow rhythm of my own breathing. Every shadow seemed to lengthen, to twist into menacing shapes, every distant sound amplified into a potential threat. I clutched the steering wheel, my knuckles white, my gaze fixed on the road ahead, desperate to reach my destination, yet simultaneously dreading its arrival. The air grew colder, a biting chill that seeped through the car's vents, mirroring the icy grip of fear that had taken root deep within my chest, tightening with every passing mile. As I approached the designated warehouse, a hulking, silent monolith against the moonless sky, I saw them. Two dark SUVs, their windows tinted to an impenetrable black, were parked discreetly a short distance away, their engines idling with a low, predatory hum. Even in the dim light, I could discern the silhouettes of men, tall and broad-shouldered, standing motionless beside the vehicles, their presence radiating an aura of quiet menace. These were the seguranças, the silent guardians mentioned in the guides, their very stillness a testament to their readiness, their unwavering vigilance. They wore dark, impeccably tailored suits. Even in this desolate setting, their faces obscured by shadow or turned away, making them seem less like men and more like extensions of the night itself. Their presence was a stark, undeniable confirmation that I had indeed crossed a threshold, stepping into a world where power was enforced not by law, but by silent, unwavering authority, and the implicit threat of swift, decisive action. The warehouse itself was a monument to decay, a vast cavernous space swallowed by shadows and the oppressive weight of disuse. The corrugated metal walls were streaked with rust, the few remaining windows shattered, allowing the biting night air to sweep through, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and forgotten machinery. A single bare bulb, hanging precariously from a rusted beam high above, cast a weak, flickering glow that did little to dispel the gloom, only serving to highlight the dust motes dancing in the frigid air. The concrete floor was cracked and uneven, littered with debris, a testament to years of neglect. The cold seeped into my bones, a physical manifestation of the dread that had taken root deep within me, chilling me to the core. This was not a place for negotiations or reasoned arguments. It was a stage set for power, for intimidation, for the brutal realities of a world I was utterly unprepared to navigate. I was led inside by one of the silent figures, his hand a firm, unyielding presence on my arm, guiding me through the labyrinthine interior. The air inside was even colder, heavy with the stillness of a place long abandoned, yet now imbued with a terrifying, expectant tension. I was directed to a specific spot in the center of the vast space, a small, illuminated island in a sea of darkness, where a single, ornate chair sat, starkly out of place amidst the industrial decay. I stood there, utterly alone, surrounded by the silent, watchful presence of the men who had brought me here, their forms barely visible in the deep shadows that clung to the perimeter. The minutes stretched into an eternity, each tick of an imaginary clock amplifying the frantic pounding of my heart, the shallow, ragged rhythm of my breath. The waiting was a torture, a slow, agonizing buildup of dread as my mind raced through every possible scenario, every terrifying outcome, each one worse than the last. Then he appeared, not with a grand entrance, but with a quiet, almost imperceptible shift in the shadows. A sudden materialization that spoke volumes about his control and his ability to command attention without effort. He emerged from the deepest gloom, his figure coalescing into a man of imposing stature, clad in a dark, impeccably tailored suit that seemed to absorb the meager light. His movements were fluid, deliberate, radiating an aura of quiet power that filled the vast space, making the air crackle with an unspoken authority. His face, when he finally stepped into the faint glow of the bare bulb, was a study in controlled intensity, his eyes dark and piercing, missing nothing. He didn't speak, didn't offer a greeting, simply stood there, observing me with a gaze that felt like a physical weight, stripping away my defenses, laying bare my fear and desperation. His presence alone was a force, a silent declaration of absolute dominion. In that moment, as his gaze bore into me, a primal instinct took over, overriding every shred of my professional dignity, every ounce of my carefully cultivated composure. It wasn't a conscious decision, not a calculated move, but a desperate, visceral reaction to the overwhelming power radiating from him, to the sheer, undeniable authority he commanded. My knees buckled, not from weakness, but from an ancient, ingrained impulse to show submission, to plead for mercy in the only way I knew how in this terrifying alien world. I sank to the cold concrete floor, the rough texture biting into my skin, but I barely registered the pain. My head bowed, my gaze fixed on the polished tips of his expensive shoes, a silent, desperate offering of humility in the face of insurmountable power. It was an act of pure, unadulterated desperation, a last-ditch effort to appeal to some hidden sliver of humanity, some faint echo of compassion in a man who seemed to possess none. My breath hitched, a ragged, shallow sound that felt deafening in the sudden, profound silence that had fallen over the warehouse. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, uneven rhythm that threatened to burst through my chest, betraying the fragile composure I was desperately trying to maintain. The air was thick with unspoken tension, a palpable weight that pressed down on me, stealing the oxygen from my lungs. My mind raced, a chaotic whirlwind of fear, regret, and a desperate, flickering hope that this act, this ultimate surrender, might somehow, miraculously, be enough. I waited, suspended in an agonizing eternity, for his response, for any sign of recognition, of understanding, of anything other than the cold, unyielding silence that stretched between us. Every nerve ending in my body was screaming, anticipating the judgment, the verdict that would seal my fate, and, perhaps, Leo's. His question, delivered in that low, dangerous rumble, cut through the suffocating silence like a razor, each syllable a hammer blow against my fragile resolve. "Who told you to bow?" It wasn't a question of curiosity, but a test, a challenge, a probe into the depths of my desperation and the true nature of my presence here. The words hung in the frigid air, heavy with unspoken meaning, demanding an answer that felt impossible to articulate. My mind raced, scrambling for a response that would convey the depth of my fear, the sincerity of my plea, without betraying any weakness that could be exploited. My throat felt dry, constricted by the terror that had stolen my voice, making the simplest words feel like an insurmountable obstacle. I could feel the silent, watchful eyes of his men, the seguranzas, from the periphery of the vast space, their collective gaze a physical weight pressing down on me, amplifying the pressure to respond, to justify my very existence in this forbidden space. The silence stretched, taut and agonizing, each second an eternity. I finally managed to force the words out, my voice a raw, trembling whisper that felt utterly inadequate in the vastness of the warehouse. "No one," I choked, the single word barely audible, a desperate admission of my own initiative. "No one told me. I came on my own. I came to beg for mercy." My eyes, still fixed on the polished tips of his shoes, dared not rise to meet his gaze, fearing what I might find there. Contempt, amusement, or worse, a complete lack of interest. The truth was a desperate gamble. Admitting my solo venture could be seen as foolishness, an act of defiance, or perhaps, just perhaps, a sign of genuine desperation that might elicit a flicker of something akin to understanding. The air remained heavy, pregnant with his unspoken judgment, and I could feel the cold sweat trickling down my spine, a testament to the sheer terror that gripped me. Every fiber of my being screamed for escape, but I was rooted to the spot, a supplicant at the feet of an unknown, terrifying power. A long, agonizing moment passed, filled only with the frantic pounding of my heart against my ribs, before he finally spoke again, his voice still low, but now with an edge of something I couldn't quite decipher. "Mercy is not a commodity we trade in, Dr. Reed." The use of my name, spoken with such chilling familiarity, sent a fresh wave of terror through me. How did he know? How much did he know about me, about Leo, about everything? It was a stark reminder of their reach, their pervasive knowledge, their ability to penetrate the carefully constructed walls of my life. He took a slow, deliberate step closer, and I instinctively flinched, a small, involuntary movement that I instantly regretted. "But," he continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow more menacing than a shout, "we do deal in solutions, and solutions always come with a price." The implication hung in the air, heavy and undeniable, a stark declaration that my desperate plea would not be met with simple compassion, but with a cold, calculated transaction. He gestured with a subtle flick of his wrist, and one of the seguranzas, a hulking figure with an impassive face, stepped forward, placing a thick manila envelope on the floor beside me. The sound of it hitting the concrete was surprisingly loud in the silence. "Your brother, Leo," the boss stated, his voice devoid of emotion, "has incurred a significant debt. Not just financial, but a debt of trust. He compromised an operation, exposed a network. A very costly mistake." My blood ran cold. Leo hadn't just borrowed money. He had actively jeopardized their interests, a far more grievous offense than I had ever imagined. The envelope, I knew instinctively, contained the damning evidence, the cold, hard facts of Leo's transgression. My initial fear for his safety now morphed into a deeper, more profound dread. This wasn't just about money. It was about betrayal, about a breach of their unwritten code, a transgression that carried far more severe consequences than any financial penalty. "The price for his mistake," he continued, his voice a low, steady drone that seemed to vibrate through the very floor beneath me, "is usually irreversible. However, your presence here, your initiative, has presented an alternative." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle, to sink into the deepest recesses of my terrified mind. I could feel his eyes on me, assessing, calculating, dissecting my every reaction. The air was thick with the unspoken terms, the terrifying conditions that would inevitably follow. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this alternative would not be a simple exchange of money, but something far more insidious, something that would demand a piece of my soul, a compromise of my very being. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a cold premonition of the moral abyss I was about to be asked to step into, a dark bargain that would forever alter the course of my life, leaving an indelible stain on everything I held sacred. He finally moved, a slow, deliberate step that brought him closer, his polished shoes now directly in my line of sight. "We require a doctor," he stated, his voice flat, devoid of any warmth or empathy. "A discreet one. Someone who can operate outside the usual channels, ask no questions, and maintain absolute silence." My mind reeled, trying to process the implications of his words. A doctor? For what? My medical training, my oath to do no harm, suddenly felt like a fragile shield against an unseen enemy. The thought of using my skills, my life's purpose, in service of this shadowy organization, for purposes I could only imagine were illicit and dangerous, sent a wave of nausea through me. It was a direct assault on my moral compass, a demand to compromise the very core of my identity. The silence stretched, filled with the unspoken horror of the proposition as I grappled with the terrifying choice laid before me: my brother's life or my soul. "Your brother's life," he added, as if reading my thoughts, his voice a low, chilling affirmation of the stakes. "Depends entirely on your cooperation. Fail us, and he vanishes, just like his friend, permanently." The casual cruelty of his words, the cold, detached way he spoke of human life, sent a fresh wave of terror through me. Sarah. Her name echoed in my mind, a stark, brutal reminder of their capability, their absolute power to erase individuals from existence without a trace. The choice, if it could even be called that, was no longer a moral dilemma, but a desperate act of survival. My brother's life, his very existence, was now a pawn in their game, and I was the only one who could play the next move. The weight of that responsibility, the crushing burden of his fate resting solely on my shoulders, was almost unbearable, threatening to suffocate me under its immense pressure. I finally managed to lift my head, my eyes, still wide with fear, meeting his for the first time. His gaze was unwavering, cold, and utterly devoid of emotion, a mirror reflecting the grim reality of my situation. "What? What do you need me to do?" I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth, a bitter acknowledgement of my surrender. The question was a concession, a painful admission that I was willing to cross any line, to compromise any principle, for the sake of Leo's survival. It was a moment of profound defeat, a complete capitulation to a force I could not fight, a world I could not escape. The silence that followed was different this time, no longer filled with tension, but with a chilling sense of finality, as if a door had just slammed shut on my old life, sealing me into this new, terrifying reality. My heart ached with a profound sense of loss, a mourning for the person I once was, the life I once led. He offered a faint, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of acknowledgement that felt more like a brand than an acceptance. "You will be contacted," he stated, his voice returning to its low, steady cadence. "You will be given instructions. You will follow them without question, and you will tell no one. Not the authorities, not your colleagues, not even your closest friends. Your silence is paramount. Your discretion is absolute." The terms were clear, unequivocal, leaving no room for doubt or deviation. I was to become a ghost, operating in the shadows, my medical skills now a tool for their clandestine operations. The thought of living a double life, of carrying such a dangerous secret, sent a fresh wave of anxiety through me. My world, once so transparent and ethical, was about to be shrouded in secrecy and moral ambiguity, a stark contrast to the healing light I had always sought to embody. As he finished speaking, he turned, a silent, fluid movement that seemed to dissolve him back into the shadows from which he had emerged. His men, the seguranzas, remained motionless, their impassive faces giving nothing away. The single bare bulb flickered overhead, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock my newfound predicament. I remained on my knees, frozen, utterly paralyzed by the weight of the decision I had just made, the terrifying path I had just agreed to walk. The cold concrete bit into my skin, a constant physical reminder of my new reality, a stark contrast to the sterile warmth of my clinic. The air in the warehouse felt heavier, thicker, imbued with the unspoken threats and the chilling promises that now bound me to this dangerous world. My mind raced, trying to comprehend the enormity of what lay ahead, the irreversible consequences of my desperate bargain. A moment later, one of the seguranzas stepped forward, his presence a silent command. He offered no words, no gestures, simply a subtle inclination of his head towards the exit, a clear directive for me to leave. I pushed myself up, my muscles stiff and trembling, my legs feeling like lead. Every step was an effort, a physical manifestation of the emotional weight pressing down on me. I walked towards the exit, my gaze fixed straight ahead, avoiding eye contact with the silent figures who watched my departure. The metallic tang of dust and decay still clung to the air, a scent that would forever be etched into my memory, a grim reminder of the night I knelt before the boss and traded my soul for my brother's life. The vastness of the warehouse seemed to swallow me whole, its oppressive gloom a fitting metaphor for the darkness that had now entered my life. I stumbled out into the biting night air, the cold a welcome shock after the oppressive atmosphere of the warehouse. My car, still parked where I had left it, felt like a beacon of normalcy, a fragile link to the life I had just irrevocably altered. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so violently that it took several attempts to unlock the door. Once inside, I slumped against the steering wheel, the cool plastic a small comfort against my burning forehead. Tears, hot and stinging, finally welled in my eyes, blurring the desolate landscape outside. They were tears of fear, of regret, of a profound, aching sadness for the innocence I had just lost, for the ethical boundaries I had just shattered. The silence of the night was no longer peaceful, but filled with the echoes of his chilling words, the weight of his demands, the terrifying reality of my new clandestine existence. The drive home was a blur, my mind replaying every moment of the encounter, every word, every chilling glance. The city lights, usually a comforting sight, now seemed distant, alien, a vibrant tapestry of a world I no longer fully belonged to. I was a phantom, moving through the familiar streets, but carrying a secret that would forever separate me from the ordinary lives unfolding around me. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, a place where I would have to pretend, to hide the truth, to live a lie. The thought of facing my colleagues, my friends, even my patients, with this dark secret festering inside me, was almost unbearable. How could I continue to heal, to offer hope, when my own hands were now bound to a world of shadows and illicit dealings? The moral compromise was a bitter pill, a poison that had already begun to seep into every fiber of my being, corrupting my very essence. Sleep offered no escape. My nights became a restless torment of vivid nightmares, replaying the scene in the warehouse, the boss's unreadable face, the chilling question, "Who told you to bow?" I would wake in a cold sweat, the metallic tang of the warehouse air still lingering in my nostrils, the cold concrete still biting into my phantom knees. My days were a careful performance, a meticulous charade of normalcy, as I went through the motions of my medical practice, my smile feeling brittle, my words hollow. Every phone call, every unexpected knock at the door sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, a constant state of hypervigilance that frayed my nerves. The weight of the secret was a physical burden, pressing down on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. I was a prisoner in my own life, bound by a desperate bargain, waiting for the inevitable call that would drag me deeper into the darkness, further away from the person I once was. The first contact came a week later, a discreet, untraceable message on the burner phone, a single cryptic address and a time. No names, no explanations, just a cold, impersonal directive. It was a small, unassuming clinic in a quiet, residential neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, far from my usual practice. The irony was not lost on me, a place of healing, now a clandestine rendezvous point for their illicit activities. My heart pounded with a mixture of dread and a grim determination. This was it, the beginning of my new life, the first step down a path I never imagined I would walk. I packed a small medical bag, my hands trembling as I selected the instruments, each one a familiar tool now imbued with a terrifying new purpose. The weight of the bag felt immense, not because of its contents, but because of the moral burden it now represented, a symbol of my forced complicity. I drove to the address, my mind a whirlwind of apprehension, the familiar streets now seeming alien and menacing. The clinic was exactly as described in the Guia visual Mafia text, discreet, unassuming, blending seamlessly into the quiet neighborhood, its ordinary facade hiding a darker purpose. The lights inside were low, casting long shadows that danced across the waiting room, creating an atmosphere of hushed secrecy. A single, silent figure, one of the seguranzas I recognized from the warehouse, stood by the entrance, his presence a stark reminder of the pervasive surveillance that now governed my life. He merely nodded, a subtle gesture that conveyed both acknowledgement and a chilling warning. I was no longer Dr. Evelyn Reed, pediatrician. I was simply the doctor, a tool in their arsenal, a pawn in their dangerous game. My skills now at the disposal of a power that operated beyond the bounds of law and morality. The air inside the clinic was thick with a tension that was almost palpable, a stark contrast to the sterile calm I was accustomed to in my own practice. The low lighting, a deliberate choice to obscure and conceal, cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with unspoken secrets. The siguranza led me through a series of dimly lit corridors, each step echoing ominously in the hushed silence, until we reached a back room. The door was heavy, soundproofed, and as it swung open, the scene inside hit me with a visceral force. A man lay on a makeshift operating table, his face pale and contorted in pain. A crude bandage wrapped around his torso, already stained a deep, alarming red. The sight of the wound, even partially obscured, sent a jolt of professional alarm through me, overriding, for a brief moment, the fear that had become my constant companion. This was not a simple injury. It was a serious, life-threatening trauma, clearly the result of some violent encounter, a grim testament to the brutal realities of their world. Another man, clearly the brazo direito from the Guia Roteiro Mafia, text description, stood over the injured figure, his expression grim, his eyes sharp and watchful as they immediately fixed on me. He was impeccably dressed, even in this clandestine setting, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the grim reality of the situation. His presence radiated an aura of calm authority, a quiet competence that was almost as intimidating as the boss's raw power. "He took a hit," he stated, his voice low and devoid of emotion, a chillingly casual description of a near-fatal injury. "Needs to be patched up. Quietly. No hospitals. No questions." His words were a direct command, a clear delineation of my role and the absolute secrecy required. My medical instincts screamed for a proper operating room, for a full team, for the resources of a modern hospital. But I knew those were luxuries I could not afford, demands I could not make. I forced myself to push down the rising panic, to focus on the task at hand, to revert to the professional detachment that was my training. My hands, though still trembling slightly, moved with practiced efficiency as I opened my medical bag, retrieving the instruments I would need. The sight of the man's wound, a deep, ragged laceration, confirmed my initial assessment. It was a bullet wound, dangerously close to vital organs. The crude bandage had done little to stem the internal bleeding, and his pulse was weak, thready. Time was of the essence. I knew that without immediate skilled intervention, he wouldn't last the night. The gravity of the situation, the sheer urgency of saving a life, momentarily eclipsed the fear of my surroundings, allowing my professional instincts to take over, guiding my every move with a precision born of years of dedicated practice and countless hours spent in emergency rooms. As I worked, my movements precise and deliberate, the brazo direito watched me with an unnerving intensity, his gaze unwavering, missing nothing. I could feel the weight of his scrutiny, the silent assessment of my skills, my composure, my trustworthiness. Every suture, every antiseptic swab, every measured breath I took felt like it was under a microscope. The silence in the room was broken only by the soft clinking of my instruments, the shallow, pained gasps of the injured man, and the frantic pounding of my own heart. I tried to block out the implications of what I was doing, the dangerous world I was now a part of, focusing solely on the intricate dance of saving a life. My hands, usually so gentle with children, now moved with a fierce, determined urgency, stitching flesh, stemming the flow of blood, fighting against the encroaching darkness that threatened to claim my patient. It was a desperate battle, fought in the shadows, far from the sterile light of a hospital. Hours blurred into an intense, focused eternity. The air grew heavy with the scent of antiseptic and blood, a grim perfume that clung to my clothes, my hair, my very being. Finally, after what felt like an age, I stepped back, my body aching with exhaustion, my mind drained but triumphant. The bleeding was stopped, the wound cleaned and sutured, the man stabilized. He was still weak, still pale, but his breathing was steadier, his pulse stronger. He would live. A wave of profound relief washed over me, a primal satisfaction that came from saving a life, a feeling that, for a brief moment, allowed me to forget the terrifying circumstances of my intervention. My hands, stained with blood, felt heavy, but also strangely powerful, a testament to the skills that had just pulled a man back from the brink, even if that man was a part of the very world that threatened my brother. The brazo direito approached the table, his eyes scanning the injured man, then turning to me, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. "He'll recover?" he asked, his voice still low, but with a hint of something that might have been approval. I nodded, my voice hoarse from disuse. "He's stable. He'll need rest, antibiotics, and careful monitoring. But yes, he'll recover." A small, almost imperceptible nod from him was my only reward, but it felt like a monumental victory. I had delivered. I had proven my worth, at least for now. The tension in the room, though still present, had shifted, a subtle easing that suggested I had passed the first test. But even in that small victory, a chilling thought lingered. I had just saved the life of a man who was likely involved in the very violence that had put my brother in danger. The moral compromise was a bitter taste in my mouth, a constant reminder of the Faustian bargain I had struck. As I began to pack my instruments, my mind raced, trying to process the implications of what had just transpired. I was now officially entangled, my medical skills irrevocably linked to their operations. There was no turning back, no pretending this was a one-time event. This was my new reality, a clandestine existence where my oath to heal was twisted into a tool for their shadowy agenda. The thought sent a fresh wave of despair through me, a profound sense of loss for the ethical clarity that had once defined my life. How long could I maintain this double life? How long before the darkness consumed me entirely? The questions swirled in my mind, unanswered, terrifying, each one a stark reminder of the precarious tightrope I was now forced to walk, balancing my brother's life against the erosion of my own soul. The brazo direito interrupted my thoughts, his voice cutting through the silence. "The boss wants to see you, now." My heart leaped into my throat, a fresh wave of terror washing over me. The boss. What did he want? Had I done something wrong? Had I failed some unspoken test? The brief sense of relief I had felt after stabilizing the patient vanished, replaced by a cold, suffocating dread. I followed him, my legs feeling like lead, each step a reluctant march towards an unknown judgment. The corridors of the clinic, once merely dim, now seemed to stretch endlessly, each shadow concealing a new threat, a new layer of their intricate, dangerous world. The air grew colder, mirroring the icy grip of fear that had once again taken root deep within my chest, tightening with every passing moment, every step closer to the man who held my fate in his hands. He led me back to the main area of the warehouse, the vast, echoing space where I had first knelt. The boss was there, seated in the ornate chair, his figure silhouetted against the weak glow of the bare bulb, an imposing, almost regal presence amidst the industrial decay. He was alone, his seguranzas having receded into the deeper shadows, their silent vigilance a constant, unnerving presence. He gestured to the empty space before him, a silent command for me to stand. I obeyed, my body rigid with tension, my gaze fixed on his face, trying to decipher the unreadable mask he presented to the world. The silence stretched, heavy and expectant, filled with the unspoken weight of his power, his judgment, his absolute control over my life and my brother's. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat of terror that threatened to betray my fragile composure. "You performed well, Dr. Reed," he finally stated, his voice a low, steady rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very floor beneath me. It wasn't praise, not truly, but a cold, detached acknowledgement of my competence. Efficient, discreet, exactly what we require. A small, almost imperceptible nod accompanied his words, a gesture that felt more like a brand than an acceptance. "Your brother's debt," he continued, his voice devoid of emotion, "is still considerable, but your service tonight has postponed the final reckoning. For now." The words were a chilling reminder of the precariousness of my situation, the temporary nature of my reprieve. I was not free. I was merely on a leash, my brother's life the tether that bound me to their dangerous world, my actions now dictating his very existence. He then leaned forward slightly, his eyes, dark and piercing, fixing on mine with an unnerving intensity. "But this is just the beginning, Doctor. There will be other situations, other needs. You will be available. Always." The finality in his voice left no room for doubt, no space for negotiation. I was their doctor now, bound to their service, my life no longer my own. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, a profound sense of entrapment that stole the air from my lungs. My medical skills, once a source of pride and purpose, were now a gilded cage, trapping me in a world of shadows and moral compromise. The weight of his words, the absolute certainty of my new reality, pressed down on me, a suffocating burden that threatened to crush my spirit entirely. "And remember," he added, his voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow more menacing than a shout, "your silence is paramount. Any deviation, any attempt to involve outsiders, any breach of trust, and your brother's postponement will become permanent. And you, Doctor, will find yourself in a situation far worse than his." The veiled threat hung in the air, cold and undeniable, a stark reminder of the consequences of disobedience. He didn't need to elaborate. The image of Sarah vanished without a trace was a vivid, terrifying testament to their capabilities. My blood ran cold, a fresh wave of terror washing over me, solidifying the grim reality of my predicament. I was a prisoner, bound by fear and love, forced to operate in the shadows, my every move dictated by the whims of a power I could not fight, a world I could not escape. He then rose, a fluid, silent movement that seemed to fill the vast space with his imposing presence. "You may leave," he stated, his voice a dismissal, a clear signal that our audience was over. I nodded, my throat too constricted to speak, my body rigid with tension. I turned and walked towards the exit, my legs feeling like lead, each step a reluctant march away from the man who now held my life, and Leo's, in his hands. The Seguranzas remained in the shadows, their silent, watchful presence a constant, unnerving reminder of the pervasive surveillance that now governed my every move. The cold air of the warehouse seemed to cling to me, a physical manifestation of the dread that had taken root deep within my chest, chilling me to the bone, a grim souvenir of my forced complicity. As I stepped out into the biting night air, the cold a welcome shock after the oppressive atmosphere of the warehouse, my mind raced, trying to process the enormity of what had just transpired. I had saved a life, yes, but at what cost? My soul felt tarnished, my ethical compass irrevocably skewed. The city lights, usually a comforting sight, now seemed distant, alien, a vibrant tapestry of a world I no longer fully belonged to. I was a phantom, moving through the familiar streets, but carrying a secret that would forever separate me from the ordinary lives unfolding around me. The weight of the secret was a physical burden, pressing down on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. I was a prisoner in my own life, bound by a desperate bargain, my medical skills now a tool for their clandestine operations, my future an uncertain path into deeper shadows. The drive home was a blur, my mind a chaotic whirlwind of fear, regret, and a grim determination. I had to survive this. For Leo. I had to find a way to navigate this dangerous world without losing myself entirely. But the path ahead was fraught with peril. Each step a potential trap. Each decision a moral compromise. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, a place where I would have to pretend, to hide the truth, to live a lie. The thought of facing my colleagues, my friends, even my patients, with this dark secret festering inside me, was almost unbearable. How could I continue to heal, to offer hope, when my own hands were now bound to a world of shadows and illicit dealings? The moral compromise was a bitter pill, a poison that had already begun to seep into every fiber of my being, corrupting my very essence, leaving me feeling hollow and profoundly alone. The days that followed blurred into a surreal, terrifying routine, a meticulous charade of normalcy that frayed my nerves and chipped away at my spirit. I continued my work at the clinic, diagnosing sniffles and offering reassurance to anxious parents, my smile feeling brittle, my words hollow. Each interaction was a performance, a desperate attempt to maintain the illusion of my old life, to hide the dark secret festering inside me. But beneath the surface, a constant state of hypervigilance simmered, an ever-present dread that tightened its grip with every phone call, every unexpected knock at the door. My sleep offered no escape, plagued by vivid nightmares of the warehouse, the boss's unreadable face, and the chilling echoes of his threats. I was a prisoner in my own life, bound by a desperate bargain, waiting for the inevitable call that would drag me deeper into the darkness, further away from the person I once was, the doctor I had always strived to be. The burner phone, a cheap, nondescript device, became my tether to this new, terrifying reality. It would ring at odd hours, a single anonymous number appearing on the screen, followed by a clipped, emotionless voice delivering cryptic instructions, an address, a time, a brief description of the patient. Each call sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, a mixture of dread and a grim determination. I would pack my medical bag, my hands trembling as I selected the instruments, each one a familiar tool now imbued with a terrifying new purpose. The weight of the bag felt immense, not because of its contents, but because of the moral burden it now represented, a symbol of my forced complicity in their shadowy world. My life had become a series of clandestine rendezvous, each one pulling me further away from the light, deeper into the moral ambiguity of their operations. My patients were varied, their injuries a grim testament to the brutal realities of the underworld: bullet wounds, knife wounds, severe blunt force trauma. Each case was a challenge, demanding all my medical expertise, often performed under less than ideal conditions in dimly lit rooms, abandoned warehouses, or the back of discreet clinics. I learned to work quickly, efficiently, asking no questions, offering no judgments, my professional detachment a fragile shield against the horrors I witnessed. The segurances were always present, silent and watchful, their impassive faces giving nothing away, their presence a constant reminder of the pervasive surveillance that governed my every move. I was merely a tool, a skilled hand in their arsenal, my oath to heal twisted into a means to maintain their dangerous operations, to keep their soldiers in the field, no matter the cost to my own soul. The moral compromises began to accumulate, a heavy weight on my conscience. I was healing men who were undoubtedly involved in violence, perhaps even the very violence that had ensnared my brother. Each successful surgery, each life saved, felt like a victory for them, a further entanglement in their web. The ethical lines I had once held so sacred blurred, then faded, replaced by a desperate singular focus. Leo. His survival was the only currency that mattered, the only justification for the dark path I was now walking. I tried to rationalize my actions, telling myself I was still saving lives, still practicing medicine, but the hollowness in my chest, the growing sense of unease, told a different story. I was becoming a part of their world, An unwilling participant in their brutal game, my hands stained not just with blood, but with the moral ambiguity of my choices. One night, the call came with a different set of instructions. Not a patient, but a meeting. The address led me to a discreet, modern mansion isolated on the outskirts of the city, a stark contrast to the decaying warehouses I had grown accustomed to. The property was surrounded by high walls, electronic surveillance, and a visible, yet subtle presence of armed guards. This was clearly a more significant location, a place of power and influence, far removed from the grimy underbelly of their operations. My heart pounded with a fresh wave of apprehension. What did they want now? Had Leo's debt resurfaced? Or was this a new, more dangerous demand, a deeper plunge into their intricate web of control? The air was thick with unspoken tension, a chilling premonition of the escalating risks that now defined my existence. I was led into a lavish yet coldly minimalist study. The boss was there, seated behind a large polished desk, his figure framed by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked a manicured garden. He was not alone. Beside him stood a woman, impeccably dressed in an elegant dark suit, her expression serious, her eyes sharp and intelligent. She was clearly not a seguranza. Her demeanor radiated a different kind of power, a quiet authority that was both intriguing and unsettling. This was a new player, a new element in their dangerous game, and her presence immediately heightened my sense of unease. The boss gestured to a chair opposite him, a silent command for me to sit. The air crackled with an unspoken tension, a palpable sense of anticipation for whatever new demand or revelation awaited me in this opulent, yet chillingly sterile environment. "Dr. Reed," the boss began, his voice a low, steady rumble. "This is Ms. Anya Petrova. She requires your unique services." He offered no further explanation, no context for her presence or her needs. Ms. Petrova's gaze was unwavering, assessing, as if she were dissecting my very soul. Her eyes, dark and intelligent, held a depth that hinted at a formidable mind, a sharp intellect that missed nothing. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a cold premonition that her needs would be far more complex, far more dangerous than simply patching up a bullet wound. She was an autoridade comprometida, from the Guia Rotero Shah's Mafia DXT description, a figure of power, ambiguous and potentially treacherous. Her presence here, in this inner sanctum, signaled a new level of entanglement, a deeper plunge into the intricate web of their influence. Ms. Petrova finally spoke, her voice calm and measured, yet with an underlying steel that left no doubt about her authority. "My associate requires a delicate procedure, one that cannot be performed in any official capacity. It requires absolute discretion, doctor, and absolute success." Her words were a chilling euphemism, a thinly veiled demand for a medical intervention that was clearly illicit, perhaps even morally reprehensible. My mind raced, trying to decipher the true nature of this delicate procedure. Was it to alter someone's appearance? To fake an illness? To facilitate an escape? The possibilities were endless, each one more terrifying than the last. The stakes, I knew instinctively, were higher than ever, not just for my brother, but for my own life, my own freedom. Failure was clearly not an option, and success would undoubtedly bind me even tighter to their dangerous world. The boss then added, his voice a low, chilling reminder, "Your brother's debt, doctor, still weighs heavily. Success in this matter will go a long way in settling it. Failure will have immediate and severe consequences for both of you." The veiled threat hung in the air, cold and undeniable, a stark declaration of the precariousness of my situation. My blood ran cold, a fresh wave of terror washing over me. This wasn't just about saving a life. It was about navigating a treacherous political landscape, a dangerous game of power and influence where I was merely a pawn. The moral compromise was a bitter pill, a poison that had already begun to seep into every fiber of my being, corrupting my very essence, leaving me feeling hollow and profoundly alone. I was trapped, caught between my love for Leo and the ever-tightening grip of their control. I managed to nod, my throat too constricted to speak, my mind reeling from the implications of their demand. The delicate procedure was not just a medical task, it was a test of loyalty, a trial by fire that would determine my fate and Leo's. Miss Petrova observed my reaction with an unnerving intensity, her eyes missing nothing, clearly assessing my resolve, my willingness to comply. The silence in the room stretched, heavy and expectant, filled with the unspoken weight of their power, their judgment, their absolute control over my life. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat of terror that threatened to betray my fragile composure. I was being pulled deeper into their world, into a labyrinth of secrets and dangers from which there seemed to be no escape. My every move now dictated by their insidious agenda. The details of the procedure were finally revealed, delivered in Ms. Petrova's calm, measured voice, each word a chilling revelation. It involved a high-profile target, an autoridad comprometida who had become a liability, and my role was to facilitate his discreet removal from the public eye, making it appear as a natural medical event. Not death, but incapacitation, a permanent silencing without violence. The audacity of their plan, the cold, calculated precision of their manipulation, sent a shiver of horror through me. I was being asked to use my medical skills not to heal, but to disable, to effectively erase a man's life without shedding a drop of blood. It was a profound violation of my oath, a complete perversion of everything I believed in, a demand that struck at the very core of my identity as a doctor. The moral dilemma was agonizing, a brutal war between my professional ethics and my desperate love for Leo. My mind screamed against it, recoiling from the sheer depravity of the act, the complete abandonment of every principle I held dear. But the image of Leo's haunted eyes, the memory of Sarah's bright smile, fueled a stubborn, desperate resolve. I had to do it. I had to cross this final, unforgivable line, even if it meant sacrificing a piece of my soul, even if it meant becoming the very thing I despised. The weight of that decision, the crushing burden of his fate resting solely on my shoulders, was almost unbearable, threatening to suffocate me under its immense pressure. I was trapped, caught in a web of their making, with no escape, no alternative, no choice but to comply. I spent the next few days in a haze of fear and meticulous planning, my mind consumed by the intricate details of the procedure. I researched, I strategized, I rehearsed every step, every contingency, determined to execute their demand with absolute precision. The target was a prominent judge, a man whose public persona was one of unimpeachable integrity, but whose secret life, I now understood, was deeply intertwined with their network. The irony was not lost on me. I was to incapacitate a figure of justice, using my medical skills to subvert the very system I had once believed in. The thought sent a fresh wave of despair through me, a profound sense of loss for the ethical clarity that had once defined my life. I was becoming a ghost, operating in the shadows, my medical skills now a tool for their clandestine operations. The day of the procedure arrived, heavy with a sense of impending doom. I was driven to a private clinic, far more luxurious and discreet than the previous ones, a place clearly designed for high-stakes, clandestine operations. The atmosphere was tense, charged with a quiet anticipation, the seguranzas more numerous, their vigilance heightened. Ms. Petrova was there, her presence a silent, watchful reminder of the gravity of the situation, her eyes missing nothing. I moved through the motions, my hands steady despite the frantic pounding of my heart, my mind focused solely on the task at hand, blocking out the moral implications, the profound violation of my oath. This was it. The moment of truth, the ultimate test of my resolve, my forced complicity, my desperate bargain for Leo's life. As I prepared the necessary medications, my hands, usually so gentle with children, now moved with a cold, clinical precision, preparing to administer a substance that would alter a man's life forever. The thought sent a shiver of horror through me, a profound sense of revulsion at the act I was about to commit. But the image of Leo's haunted eyes, the memory of Sarah's bright smile, flashed in my mind, stealing my resolve. I had to do this. For him. The weight of that decision, the crushing burden of his fate resting solely on my shoulders, was almost unbearable, threatening to suffocate me under its immense pressure. I was a prisoner, bound by fear and love, forced to operate in the shadows, my every move dictated by the whims of a power I could not fight, a world I could not escape. The judge was brought in, his face pale, his demeanor agitated, clearly unaware of the true nature of his visit. He believed he was there for a routine checkup, a discreet consultation for a minor ailment. The deception was chilling, the ease with which they manipulated reality a stark testament to their pervasive power. I approached him, my face a carefully constructed mask of professional calm, my voice steady as I explained the procedure, a fabricated narrative designed to allay his suspicions. My hands, though trembling slightly, moved with practiced efficiency as I administered the substance, watching as his eyes slowly glazed over, his body relaxing into an unnatural calm. The transformation was subtle, insidious, a chilling testament to the power of medicine and its perversion in the hands of those who wielded it for darker purposes. The aftermath was a blur of hushed conversations, swift movements, and the chilling efficiency of their operation. The judge was carefully moved, his body now a puppet, his mind adrift in a chemically induced fog. Ms. Petrova observed the entire process with an unnerving intensity, her eyes missing nothing, a flicker of satisfaction in their depths. She offered a small, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of approval that felt more like a brand than an acceptance. "Excellent, Dr. Reed," she stated, her voice calm and measured. "Absolute discretion. Absolute success." Her words were a chilling affirmation of my forced complicity, a stark reminder of the irreversible line I had just crossed, the profound ethical boundaries I had just shattered. I had delivered. I had proven my worth, at least for now, but at what cost to my own soul? As I left the clinic, the cold night air felt like a physical assault, a stark contrast to the sterile warmth of the operating room. My hands, though clean, felt irrevocably stained, not with blood, but with the moral compromise of my actions. The city lights, usually a comforting sight, now seemed distant, alien, a vibrant tapestry of a world I no longer fully belonged to. I was a phantom, moving through the familiar streets, but carrying a secret that would forever separate me from the ordinary lives unfolding around me. The weight of the secret was a physical burden, pressing down on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. I was a prisoner in my own life, bound by a desperate bargain, my medical skills now a tool for their clandestine operations, my future an uncertain path into deeper shadows, a path from which there seemed to be no return. The next call came a few days later, not from the burner phone, but from Leo's own number. My heart leaped into my throat, a mixture of hope and dread. His voice, though still weak, was filled with an overwhelming sense of relief, a profound gratitude that brought tears to my eyes. He was safe. He was free. The debt, he explained, had been settled. The words were vague, but the meaning was clear. My desperate bargain, my profound moral compromise had worked. I had saved him. A wave of profound relief washed over me, a primal satisfaction that, for a brief moment, allowed me to forget the terrifying circumstances of my intervention. But even in that small victory, a chilling thought lingered. I had paid a price far greater than any financial debt, a piece of my soul irrevocably lost in the shadows of their world. My life, though outwardly restored to its former routine, was irrevocably altered. The innocence was gone, replaced by a deep-seated paranoia, a constant awareness of the shadows that lurked beneath the surface of everyday life. I saw their influence everywhere, in the discreet SUVs, the watchful eyes, the subtle shifts in power dynamics. My medical practice continued, but it was no longer a sanctuary, no longer a place of pure healing. It was a front, a meticulously maintained illusion, behind which lay a dark secret, a profound moral compromise that would forever define me. I was a doctor, yes, but I was also something else, something darker, something irrevocably linked to the underworld, a silent accomplice in their dangerous game. The ambiguity of my new existence was a heavy burden, a constant reminder of the price I had paid for my brother's life. The relationship with Leo was strained, irrevocably altered by the unspoken truth that lay between us. He was grateful, profoundly so, but a subtle distance had grown, a silent acknowledgement of the dark forces that had intervened on his behalf. He didn't ask questions, and I offered no explanations, the secret too heavy, too dangerous to share. We were both survivors, bound by a shared trauma, but separated by the profound moral chasm that now defined my life. He had been pulled back from the brink, but I had stepped into the abyss, and the darkness had left its indelible mark. The ambiguity of our future, the lingering threat of their pervasive influence, hung over us like a perpetual storm cloud, a constant reminder that even in victory, there was no true escape, no complete freedom from the shadows. The silence that now often settles around me is not the peaceful quiet of my old life, but a heavy, watchful stillness, a constant reminder of the shadows that cling to my every step. Leo is safe, living a quiet life in a different city, a ghost of his former self, but alive. And I, Dr. Evelyn Reed, continue my practice, my hands still healing, but my soul irrevocably scarred. The burner phone remains, a dormant serpent in my drawer, its silence more terrifying than its ring, for I know it can awaken at any moment, pulling me back into the clandestine world I now inhabit. The moral ambiguity of my existence is a constant companion, a whisper in the back of my mind, questioning every decision, every interaction, every moment of fragile peace. I am free, yet bound, a paradox of my own making, forever marked by the desperate bargain I struck, forever walking the tightrope between light and shadow, waiting for the next tremor that will inevitably shake my carefully constructed facade. I often find myself staring out my clinic window, watching the ordinary lives unfold on the street below, a world I once belonged to, now viewed from a distance, through a pane of glass that feels like an impenetrable barrier, the children laughing, the parents rushing, the mundane rhythm of everyday existence. It all seems so fragile, so vulnerable to the unseen forces that lurk beneath the surface. I see the discreet SUVs, the watchful eyes, the subtle shifts in power dynamics, everywhere. My paranoia is a constant hum, a low-frequency vibration that never truly fades, a grim souvenir of my forced complicity. I saved my brother, yes, but I lost a part of myself in the process, a piece of my soul traded for his life, leaving me to wonder if the cost was truly worth the salvation, if true freedom can ever be found when one's hands are forever stained by the shadows.